Hello friends, welcome back to another video and a special hello if you're new. My name is Casey and today I'm going to be sharing some fall reading recommendations for you. I have 5 books to share, but one's a duology, so I kind of have 6 books to share. Another one's a series as well, so I guess I have a lot of books. It can trickle into a lot of books if you're interested, but I have the sniffles, I'm sorry. But I've tried to come up with books that are in different genres and that fit different elements of fall. So I have some books that kind of fall more with like the magical, like spooky side of fall, and then just some that I think are just cozy. And I have a lot of different genres. I have some contemporary, some classics, some YA, magical realism. So let's get into the books. Alright, starting off with, I'm going to talk about a classic. I did a whole video last year about spooky classics or atmospheric classics that I recommend for this time of year, and this is on it, but I still want to talk about it because I just think it's the perfect time to read this book, and I feel like it's a classic that not as many people know of, and it is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. I will say that I think that this book is very approachable. I don't think that it's like scary or overly thrilling to where like you would lose sleep. I know when I read Dracula, I lost sleep because it was kind of scary. Like I would lay in bed after like I had read some on it and I would be like, why did I read this before bed? Because I was kind of scared. And I know like when I read Frankenstein, I felt just like disturbed, honestly. But this one, it didn't like keep me up at night or anything. The only thing that it really did was just keep me wanting to read because it's more mysterious, like thrillery. And I just kept wanting to find out like what was going to happen next. So basically the premise of this is a young artist is living in London and he has decided to teach. So he is leaving London to go out to the countryside to teach a young lady at an estate how to draw and just art in general. So he is having kind of a going away party with his family and some friends, and he is leaving the party and he's walking home, and as he's walking home he meets a woman who is dressed all in white and seems very lost, very disoriented, and like she's a very obviously out of place. So being a gentleman, he goes to help her and he kind of guides her in the direction that she needs to go, and she doesn't really give him a lot of backstory about what she's doing there or what's going on in her life and circumstances. So he leads her in the general direction that she needs to go, and then he starts walking home. And as he's getting close to home, some policemen come by and they're asking like everyone that they're meeting if they've seen a woman dressed in white because a woman has escaped from an asylum. So our main character doesn't really think a ton of this. He just kind of, goes home, does his thing, and then moves out to the countryside. While he's there in teaching art, he starts to fall in love with the young woman who he is teaching. And unbeknownst to him, the woman in white is starting to show up in this in his new circumstances. She's at a graveyard. People are spotting this woman dressed all in white, and it just evolves into this masterfully crafted mystery. I just loved this book so much. I know it's a little bit slower paced, but honestly, I just kept reading and reading because I just wanted to know what was going to happen and how the mystery involved itself in each layer that was revealed. It just like hooked me more and more. I just loved this so stinking much. I will also say that when I first read this book, I thought that Wilkie Collins was a pen name for a woman, so I went and researched it and found out no, it is in fact a man. But it's very like feministic, I think, with some of the themes and portrayals of women within the novel, especially for its time. And I really enjoyed that, and hopefully you would too. But the portrayals of the different female characters was really, really interesting, and I very much enjoyed it. I just think that this is the perfect classic to read this time of year, and if you have not read it, I know we're probably going to be seeing lots of stuff about like Frankenstein, but if you've not read it, like you need to read this one because it is so good. Next, I have The Rules of Magic by Alice Hoffman. So if you've read or watched Practical Magic, this is the prequel to it. So this is about the Owens ants. within practical magic. So this is about their coming of age and like their journey into kind of how they catch that lure of being the Owens aunts. There are 3 siblings, so there is Franny, Jet, and Vincent. And their coming of age takes place in like the 60s or 70s, so there's a lot of like cultural things that were happening, so like the Vietnam War and like kind of like the folk music movement and different things like that that are incorporated in here, which I really enjoyed. I will say that I actually like this one better than Practical Magic. I just enjoyed the like sibling dynamic. I enjoyed the coming of age dynamic more so than in Practical Magic. And I liked that this set of Owenses just more embraced the magical gift that was given to them. And I also just, you know, loved finding more about the history of the family and like how there's always like an Owens aunt to kind of guide the next generation. I just really loved those elements of it. I just really enjoy Alice Hoffman's writing. I will say that this is definitely more plot driven than character driven. I didn't feel like overly attached to any of the characters. I wasn't super invested in them, but I was invested in the plot and what was happening to them. So if you like very strongly like character driven novels, then this might like fail to hit the mark in some ways for you, but it's so good in terms of the plot. There are some sad things that happen, just a little heads up, but it really weaves in the story and really defines how the characters choose to live their lives. And I just think that it just flows like so smoothly and so perfectly into Practical Magic. It was just so incredibly well done. I think in terms of the way they were published, they go back in time. So it starts with Practical Magic, then this one, and then I think there's 2 more. But I think reading them in the opposite order, so from past to present, would be really nice because of the way, or at least with the last 2, the way that they just flow in together so well. All right, the next book was one of my favorite books of the year last year, which really surprised me because I didn't expect for it to be. I actually started reading it on my Kindle, and then when I just got into it, I was like, I know that I'm going to want to reread this book over and over and over again, so I need to have a copy of it. And it is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This tells the story of a young woman named Adeline. She lives in France in 1714, and it is the eve of her wedding. She has a lot of anxiety over being married. She doesn't want to be married. She has a lot of just anxiety about her future and being a wife and having children and just never getting to live for herself. And she just knows that basically she's going to get married, have children, be a mother, and then she's going to die. Whether she dies in childbirth or illness or something, she just doesn't have a lot of life left. Like, it's over. And so on the eve of her wedding, she runs out into the woods and she is praying to the gods to kind of change her circumstances and just give her a different chance in life. So there is a saying within her village that you cannot pray to the gods that will answer after dark, but it is dusk. It is the eve of her wedding. So when she is in the woods, the sun is setting, and she doesn't realize that when the god comes to answer her prayer, it's actually one of the ones that you don't want to make a bargain with. And so she unbeknowingly makes a bargain, and he grants her the wish that she can live forever. And as a result, she does get to live forever, but anyone who sees her will instantly forget her when they aren't face to face. So when she leaves the room, they don't remember her. So she's forced to kind of live through hundreds of years isolated and alone, until it's present day when the book was written. So it's in 2018 New York. She walks into a bookstore and meets someone who is actually able to remember her. I thought that this was one of the most beautiful love stories that I have ever read. I loved it so much, and I thought when I was reading that I knew how it was going to end, and I didn't. It was just so full of twists and turns, and it just didn't go the way that I expected it would. I loved reading about the different years that Addie lived and the different cultural movements and art movements. The kind of stars on the front represent freckles that she has, and there are different artworks and things like that that she has influenced. And I thought that was just so beautifully done, because even though like people that she interacted with didn't know her and they weren't able to remember her, their souls still had a connection that she felt home-like to them, and they kept interacting because they felt so connected to her, even though they didn't remember her from one day to the next. And I just love how that was done. I also liked that, like, the god or the demon or however you want to categorize him, that's kind of like the villain in the story. I love that the way that they were written, and the way like his and Addie's story came together throughout the years. I just think that this book is just so masterfully crafted, and with that kind of magical element, I just think fall is the perfect time to read this book if you haven't already. I know it was really popular quite a few years ago when it came out, and I remember so many people reading it, and I just never got around to it. And I wish so much that I had read it then, because I think it would have been just the best experience to have had bukus of people to talk to about it. But still, like, don't let that deter you from reading it, because it's beautiful. And everyone I know who has read it, like, loves to talk about it. So I'm sure you can find someone in your life to talk to about it if you're reading it for the first time. But it is amazing, and I just, like, even now talking about it, I just cannot wait to come back to the story one day. Kind of like I briefly mentioned, there is something about fall that just makes me think of magic. It feels like magic is in the air, and I always get the itch to read books that have magic, or set in magical worlds or fantasy worlds, or books that have magical realism. I love the idea of magical realism. I love the idea that one day I can walk into a thrift store and come out with a mug that keeps my tea the perfect temperature, or keeps endlessly filling up with tea. And I just think in the world that we live in, the idea that there is like magic or coziness to be found in it is just a beautiful thought. And I love magical realism so much. So if you haven't already guessed which duology I'm going to be recommending, I'm going to be recommending the Divine Rivals duology by Rebecca Ross. So the first book is Divine Rivals, and then the second book is Ruthless Vows. I do think the prequel of this is out as well, so I feel like it's the perfect time to dive into it, or re-dive into it if you read it when it first came out. Basically, this tells the story of a young girl named Iris. So in the world that she lives in, there are different gods. All of the gods are asleep but two, and the two gods that are awake are warring with one another. One wants to come in and take over and pretty much force all of like the humans within the country to like bow down to serve him, and then the other god, like the good god, is like trying to stop that. But I feel like the gods were written very complexly. Like, even the good god isn't perfect and isn't like good in like the sense of the word. Like, she definitely has flaws. But Iris is a young woman. She has a mom who is just not dependable, and her brother is fighting at the front for the war, and she feels very lonely, very isolated. They're very poverty stricken, and she works at a newspaper where she works with some wealthier people, and she just feels very insecure, and she's having this competition to win this like column with another young man who works at her newspaper named Roman. So Iris finds this old typewriter that used to be her grandmother's, and she is writing letters, and then to her brother who's at the front, and then she is sticking them under her wardrobe, and then the letters are disappearing. Unbeknownst to Iris, the letters are going to Roman, who is her rival at work, and he is writing her back. So he's not pretending to be her brother, he's just pretending to be a friend, but he is writing her letters. Iris eventually does go to the front to report on the war, and her and Roman are able to stay connected through that. I won't go into any more detail, but because I don't want to give anything away. But this is just the most beautiful, wholesome love story I think that I have ever read. And I read these books last year, and I beat myself up even now because I didn't put it on my top books of the year. And I just still think about this duology all the time. So I don't know why I didn't include it in my top. I don't know, because it was just so beautiful and perfect, and I loved it so stinking much. Like I said, it's just pure-hearted and beautiful. I love the magic system. Again, I love magical realism. I love the warring of the gods. I loved how dynamic the gods' characters were. So like, you understand the reasoning of the bad God, whereas you see flaws in the good God. Like, I loved that it wasn't just like black and white. And it is just so good. I will say the first book is definitely a little bit more romance, and then the second book is more war and world building. But they just flow together beautifully. I love them. And again, just magical coziness, and I highly recommend you read them. The last book is a little bit of a wild card, but I saw it on my shelf and I just thought that it would just be a great book to recommend. And it is My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Fredrik Backman. So this is the first Backman book that I ever read years and years and years ago, and I loved it. And I've wanted to read it again, and I just haven't. But basically, it tells the story of a young girl. She is 11, and her grandmother is her very best friend. They live in an apartment, so she and her family live on one side, and then across the hall is her grandmother, and her grandmother is her absolute best friend. Her grandmother passes away and leaves the girl, her name's Elsa. She leaves Elsa with these letters to give to all of the people that her grandmother has wronged. So Elsa takes it upon herself to deliver these letters to the people that her grandmother has wronged, and finds out what had happened and why her grandmother, did what she did, and just goes on this grand adventure. And it is just so wholesome. I love the way that Backman writes his characters. They are quirky and fun and human, so human, and they have so many flaws, but you root for them anyway. And it is just cozy and fun, and it does a lot of alluding to like magical kingdoms and fairy tales, and I just really really love this one and recommend it. It's just cozy. It just feels like sinking into a warm cup of tea. And I think when we're trying to read books like with thrilling or murders or whatever it is that you like to read this time of year, I just think that this is just such a good cozy read for this time of year. And it's just so heartfelt and human, and it's just one of those books that makes you realize like the world isn't a bad place. Like, it can be really beautiful too. So I really recommend this one. All right, friends, thank you so much for being here and listening to me babble on about books. Please let me know if you have any reading recommendations for me or what you're reading this fall and autumn. And I will see you very soon in another video. Bye.